I'll do, just when we're waiting, we've a really healthy number in there now. Just when we're waiting, I might just start off with our introduction. So my own name is Aisling Whelan. I'm the content marketing manager here at UCD Professional Academy. On the call, I'm joined with both Dr. Garrett Ryan, who's going to present this webinar, and my colleague Austin. Austin is an education consultant for UCD Professional Academy, and he's on the call really just to help and assist with any questions that you might have in relation to any of our courses. So on that, we're going to facilitate a Q&A at the end of the webinar. So please feel free to pop your questions into the Q&A as well. You could probably go to the next slide there, Garrett, if that's okay. So just to cover some housekeeping just before we kick off. So as you can probably tell, the webinar is being recorded. We're going to share the recording with you afterwards via email in the coming days, along with this slide deck as well. So you're able to distribute it with your colleagues, maybe if they were not able to attend. As I mentioned, if you have any questions, please absolutely do feel free to pop them in the Q&A box below. You might notice that the chat box itself is disabled. That's just a webinar feature. We can't change it. But to the left of the chat box, there is a Q&A feature, and absolutely feel free to pop the questions in. So just a little bit on Garrett. So today our webinar is brought to you by Dr. Garrett Ryan. Dr. Garrett Ryan holds a doctorate in training and education and a master's in training and education and leadership. It's a hefty title, so apologies if it's a bit of a tongue twister for me. He's a broad lecturing portfolio at master's and undergraduate level, and he also teaches at UCD Professional Academy in topics including leadership and management, HR management, change management, and so forth. Prior to return to academia, he held a number of leadership roles in Fortune 500 companies, amassing over 18 years' experience. So with that being said, we are very excited to have Dr. Garrett Ryan join us today. So Garrett, when you're ready, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you very much, Aisling, for that glowing introduction. And I'm delighted and honoured to be asked to present this webinar, which will hopefully give you a glimpse into the future and to provide you with some inkling of some of the leadership issues that may be coming down the track and how you might deal with some of those things. So without further ado, we'll make a start. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so really what we're trying to get a view in here is a roadmap, I suppose, for future leadership. And it really starts with curiosity. And as leaders, we always must attempt to try and have some level of understanding of how the future is going to unfold. And then as we understand that, what kind of things we need to think about in order to prepare for that future. So what we're going to have a look at today, we're going to have a look at future megatrends that might influence our leadership, and I'll discuss what a megatrend is and all that. And then we're going to have a look at workforce diversity, because we have the most diverse workforce now than we've ever had in our history. Then I'm going to look at AI and technology in leadership. And of course, that is a very, very fast moving picture in terms of the development of AI and how that's going to impact our lives. And then I'm going to have a look finally then at some of the leadership models that have gained more prominence recently, and give you a little explanation as to why that might be. And then I'll open the floor to some Q&A. Hopefully I'll get a chance to answer some of your questions. And then finally, at the end, then there's some source material and further readings that I've left there for you that you might be able to enjoy in the fullness of time when you have a bit more leisure, I suppose, spending time. So the future of megatrends that might influence our leadership. So I guess the first thing is to understand the difference between what is a trend and a megatrend, and understanding how megatrends emerge, and finally recognizing the influence of megatrends on the market and maybe the business models, because that helps us see why and how megatrends we should react to them as leaders. Okay, so a definition then of a megatrend. A megatrend is something that's global, it's sustained, it has impact on the macroeconomic forces of development, and it has a strong impact on business, economy, society, culture, and our personal lives. And they are very strong forces in terms of how they shape how we go about our lives and how we go about in our working lives. So we are in a complex and changing world. Innovation is relentless and disruption is accelerating. And megatrends are something that are a massive disruptor in terms of how our normal lives are conducted. So what we need to do is to make sense of these disruptive forces so that we can help people and organizations to survive in the future. And, you know, people, I suppose, are even more concerned about current forces of change. And all that has led to the conceptualization of what we call a megatrend. Now, just to present the corollary of that, I suppose a trend is something like fashion, for instance. It may change how we live for a month or two. When summer comes, all the fashion changes, and then when winter comes, it all changes again. But it is not something that has a sustained single impact on how we live and work. So why do they matter? They have different meanings and different impacts on different industries and individuals. And if we analyze it well, it can inspire companies and innovation strategies. It contributes to current society and markets and our culture. And finally, in terms of research and development, it also encourages spending and gives, I suppose, direction to that spending. So I'll give you some examples then of what we looked at back in 1982. The following things were suggested as going to be megatrends, which would have influence in our lives, I suppose. And one of the things that they saw back then was moving from an industrial society to an information society. And we can see that that megatrend has in fact come true, I suppose, especially when we look at the advent of the service sector and how that has become moved from an industrial economic driver to a services driven society. And then we look at forced technology to high tech and high touch. Okay, so where before we were high tech, but we didn't really have that much influence on it. It was something that happened to us rather than us having any kind of great part in how we interacted with that tech. It was something that was given to us. Whereas now we see in society in terms of how we react and in terms of technology and the use of it, we have an awful lot more definition over how we interact and how we utilize technology. We have gone from national economies to global economies. So globalization has certainly driven that, and technology has had a huge part to play in it. But it was something that was predicted back in 1982. And remember, 1982 was prior to the internet even being available. So it was certainly a good predictor. Then moving from short-termism to long-termism, and I suppose in what that means is in terms of strategies, in terms of business, that we're now capable. We have the models, we have the capability, we have the access to data that they wouldn't have had back then. And now in terms of being able to analyze and being able to predict, we have those kind of models. Then we've gone from centralization to decentralization. So before everything, nearly everything was focused on headquarters. Even government departments was very, very focused on centralization. Now we see that in many parts of, certainly of the Irish civil service, has moved into all corners of Ireland, whereas before the government buildings only existed in Dublin, and everything was driven out of there. And I think we can see that that, I suppose, behavior or that trend or that mega trend mirrored across other societies across Europe. We've gone from institutional help to self-help. So we have self-banking in terms of how we react in work. Many of us have access to an intranet, which allows us to interact with our data, whereas before we might have had to ask a manager or ask somebody in HR to retrieve our records. now we're capable of doing all of that kind of thing ourselves. Then in terms of hierarchies in networking, so before, back in 1982, everything was very, very hierarchical. And now we have very much more a network society in terms of business, in terms of how we're able to interact with our colleagues and peer to peer, and even peer to other managers, that indeed how we get on and work, and what determines our success in a working environment is our ability, increasingly reliant on our ability to network. So, and then in terms of the short term, that seems a little bit long when I kind of talked about long term earlier, but short term refers to the speed at which things are moving, which makes us very much more, I suppose, very quick in terms of cycles, whereas before we used to go year to year, now we're going quarter to quarter. And in fact, I know many businesses that are going with planning models even shorter than that. So there's some of the predictions that were back in 1982, and you can see that many of those have come true. So some examples of what they're talking about as a future trend: the sharing economy. So it's emerged through technological breakthroughs, and urbanization and demographic shifts have shaped new business models based on access to products and services over their outright ownership, and related business models to them. And it's based on a demand model that is highly risky, but on the other hand, when successful, it may completely disrupt an industry, and over the 2030, it will be able to reshape global economy. So we even see that in terms of a simple example might be GoCar.ie, where everybody previous to that would want to own a car outright. Now we see that there's a whole business model based on the fact that people don't necessarily want to own something outright and are quite happy to share something and not own it. Okay, so sorry, I just want to give some other examples of that in terms of the sharing economy. That years ago, when I was a child, for instance, we used to rent our TV because we weren't wealthy enough to own one, and we used to go to a shop called RTV Rentals and rent our TV, and it was a big thing in our family when we came to own a TV. But now it's very interesting that we see that we may be moving back to that, where people kind of, if you think of accommodation, you think of people going for less house ownership, so they might become more transient, and as being more transient in terms of how they move and how often they move, they may not want these big things that they own outright, and might be very much more happy to rent the things that we have come to commonly own, I suppose, previously. Another mega trend is the silver economy. We tend to think of our retirement people as living off state pensions and so on and so forth, and as a result having less disposable income. But of course, we're living much longer now than ever before. Legislation has changed in terms of we're no longer required to retire at 65. So we have an awful lot more people in the 60+ market in work, and therefore have access to much more disposable income than their previous generations of retirees would ever have had. So it has been estimated that in 2030, 29% of people in developed countries will be older than 60, but the real big one is in the next line. Those under 30 in the past 2 decades, according to Eurostat in their global spending power, they will reach 15 trillion by 2030. $15 trillion is the estimated size of the silver economy. So what do we need to do in terms of leadership? What does that really mean for us? Basically, what we're saying is, in terms of characteristics, companies are moving away from the boring, big and beige design for elderly people. People are more interested with new technology and are more au fait with it now than ever before. So there's new opportunities in property, in development, in car making, special technology products and financial services. Of course, offering models that are specifically tailored to the silver economy. Nestle redesigned its jars to make them easier to grip. They also, let's say, reworked their Black Magic chocolate box to make the chocolates in the box exactly align as they were pictured on the outside of the box, and also widened the gap so that people with arthritic fingers could get in and actually get the sweet out of the wrappers more easily. And then IKEA of Sweden, of course, they summed up the opportunities provided by information by sharing that by looking into the needs of aging populations, they will also care for the needs of everyone else. And that's the beauty of it. So IKEA and many, many more besides are looking into how to make a business prospect out of the silver economy. Then big data and micro manufacturing. So we're used to the idea of manufacturing, and we see it in big industrial buildings, but micro manufacturing is something that we ourselves may get involved in the future. Okay, so if we are leveraging big data and selling intelligent information, the idea is we can create tailor-made services that enable customers to communicate, interact, and buy and sell with ease. So something that is quite expensive at the moment, but may become as ubiquitous as our own printers that we have in our houses today are 3D printers. So that will make it possible for us in our homes to create bespoke items that we would never have thought possible before. Also, the main characteristics then in 3D and 4D printing, I suppose there are risks in terms of counterfeiting because these models can do that and they can copy items, okay? But in terms of how they might work, clothes, vehicles, drones, all of these things we may be able to create for ourselves and sell to our neighbors. So something as well that might be worth looking at in terms of who's actually doing this right now. They've got Shapeways, Craftworks, iMaterialize, and QBG. They offer templates, pre-built templates for designing or customizing objects online. And then you can send that template, and then a business will 3D or 4D print that for you. And Crayon themselves, everyone who has a child knows who Crayon are. They offer to turn any child's drawing into a three-dimensional toy for $130. So that's something that is we would never have imagined possible. We could only ever buy toys that were offered to us on the shelves. Now we might end up designing them ourselves and having them and maybe selling them. So blockchain then. Blockchain is huge. I suppose you could nearly have a whole presentation devoted to blockchain, but in terms of powering cryptocurrencies, it has various potentials in major industries, technology, media, telecommunications. It can support low-cost micropayments, and in addition, it offers superior means of powering loyalty points for industries such as travel and hospitality. It can secure digital assets. We saw that in the strike that was there in Hollywood, whereas now that strike was somewhat averted now, and actors have returned back to work because they now have ownership of digital assets, and blockchain was one of the things that secured that. Okay, also voting records, vehicle registries, digital identities in the public sector, all of those may be driven by blockchain in the future. We have digital currency groups like Circle Internet and Ripple Labs that offer alternative financial services. And then we've got DocuSign apps for Visa. What they did is they connected for the connected car, they integrated Bitcoin with blockchain records to enable contracts in terms of purchasing cars. So blockchain is likely to have a huge impact in terms of how we go about our lives. Okay, and also there's other reading material in terms of megatrends that's included at the end of the deck if you'd like to look at those. But what I want to go through now is what our workforce is likely to be like. So we're going to have a look at workforce diversity and generational dynamics, and we'll also have a look at neurodiversity, which is something that I hope you'll find of interest. So currently, as I said at the opening of our presentation, we have more generations in the workforce now than we have ever had before. We have traditionalists born between 1925 and 1945. We've got baby boomers, 1946 to 64, Generation X, up to 1980, millennials between 1980 and 2000, and now we have Generation Z entering the workforce in 2000, between 2000 and 2020. So those are the people born in those years. So that presents a very interesting and exciting but challenging time for leaders when they're dealing with such diversity in terms of generations in the workforce. So in terms of how or what we need to know about them, I just want to, before we do that, I'd like to launch a poll just to understand, what brackets are you in? Okay, we'll just give it a few more seconds, but I think we can see that it's starting to show us that we've got 1% in terms of traditionalists, we've got baby boomers, 11%, Generation X, 52%, millennials are 35%, and we've got Generation Z, 1%. So thank you very much. I think that's very interesting, and I think it more or less, to some extent mirrors the stats that we're looking at. Okay, so I'll just end that poll there and I'll share the results. So thank you very much for participating in that. I think it's very interesting in terms of what we need to start thinking about, because millennials will very quickly, I suppose, in the next couple of years, overtake Generation X, and baby boomers will be slowly moving out. We'll have less of the traditionalists, but Generation Z, we'll see that figure starting to grow and grow as we move into the next few years and the next decade, for sure. So in terms of what we need to know about them, okay, we've already looked at the years, okay, but their working style of a traditionalist is they value seniority. It's something that they were used to. Hierarchy, remember we looked at that term back in 1980s, that was something that was very familiar. Often they respect rules and regulations and they like them, okay, because they were a thing of their era. Often remaining loyal to a single company throughout their careers. I think that would be something that would describe my father. He was in the same company for almost his entire working life. They value face-to-face engagements, handwritten notes instead of email. So these are the things that they value, and what we need to do to support traditionalists, while most of them are retired, their work ethic is very strong. They have a very strong sense of responsibility, and their communication style have influenced the baby boomers, okay, which we'll go on to talk about a little bit later. But the point is that these are the things they value, and what we need to understand is how do we extract value from that, knowing that they have a strong sense of responsibility and knowing that they have a great work ethic is a very useful thing for a leader to think about in terms of traditionalists in their in their workforce. Then if we look at the baby boomers, they also value teamwork now. They're less individualists, but they also like their individual accomplishments also. But teamwork is something that they became used to. Remember, these are the type of people that launched rockets to the moon. They seek recognition for their efforts, and they prioritize long-term company value. The communication styles that they're used to and they like is face-to-face. Phone calls are preferred, but email is now widely accepted among those. Okay, but in terms of support, providing opportunities for them to prove themselves, acknowledge their contributions, and what is really, really important is to see how they can be used in terms of what mentorship they could provide for Generation X and Generation Z. I think that we need to really extract the value from that diversity and from that particular cohort in our workforce. Okay, so millennials then, okay, so what they value meaningful work. So not just work, has to have value to them, meaningful. It matters what they do more than any generation previously, okay? They value great managers, teamwork, they like challenge, and they also like flexibility in the work-life balance. And that is the new term that's entered into this now, work-life balance. They're completely au fait with instant messages, texting, and email. So they're far more ubiquitous across communication styles or the use of technology for do that. And what they really value then in terms of leadership is to provide more immediate feedback and offer flexible work. Okay, 45% of them experience burnout due to workload intensity. So it's not a case that they are afraid of work, but they will drive themselves quite hard, but they require that immediate feedback and that flexibility. Okay, now Generation X, what's so different about them? Okay, their working style, they like working independently, but they may switch jobs quite often in comparison to previous generations. They also seek fair pay and compensation for extra work and skill building opportunities. So these are the things that motivate them. These are the things that they value. And then in terms of communication style, they're pretty similar to Generation Y there. Okay, but again, immediate feedback, work-life balance, and development and coaching. These are the things that they really value in terms of motivation, and how to motivate Generation X is to talk about them, about their future, about development, and then align them with a coach. And remember what we said there about the utilization of older generations as mentors. That might be the exact thing that we need to do to draw the synergies together for those things. Okay, finally, Generation Z, okay, they're independent, they are self-aware, they value personalization, okay, because they value their independence and they want to be seen as individuals. They value creativity, and diversity and inclusion is something that would definitely be a characteristic of Gen Z. Okay, they are also possibly one of the most highly educated generations we've ever had. Okay, but in terms of that, I suppose, you know, they're more able and willing to leave companies that don't align with their personal values. Okay, so that is something that really matters to them more than previous generations. Okay, they're completely au fait with instant messaging, texting, and now social media, Facebook, looking at this for information. So they're far more tech savvy, I suppose, than any generation before. But in terms of how we might support them in the workplace, let them engage in multiple projects. Most importantly, prioritize flexible work, since 63% of Gen Zers favor hybrid work. And it's often said to me, people have said, is this hybrid working, something that's going to stay? And I basically said, when you start to see governments legislating, then you know that this is not something that's going to go away. So we need to, as leaders and in our organizations, we need to embrace it and utilize it rather than trying to find ways to chip away at it, because once government has legislated for it, it's not going to disappear. Okay, so how to bridge that generational divide? Use a variety of communication channels. Okay, digital platforms work wonders for youngers who are tech savvy. Then nothing beats the power of active listening. We're very influenced by that, and we're impressed by that, I suppose, as a society. Okay, genuine respect and encourage all employees, regardless of age, to participate. And, I suppose after all, who doesn't feel, if you don't feel respected, then you're not likely to be motivated, and you certainly won't bring your best to the workforce. Okay, so something I suppose that's dear to my heart, as I have a neurodiverse son. He has ADD and he has dyslexia. So when I looked into this, it was something that I suppose was driven out a little bit of a personal passion there, but nevertheless, it has some real impact for leaders and for how we might think about our workforce and the makeup of that workforce. So what the stats tell me is that there's around 15–20% of the population is considered to be neurodivergent, and approximately 5–10% of the global population has dyslexia. So the World Health Organization estimates then that 1 in 160 children are on the autism spectrum. And what that really means, I suppose, also in terms of autism and the other neurodiversities, is often their IQ is quite high, in fact, higher than average. So research shows that conditions such as autism and dyslexia can bestow special skills in recognition or memory or mathematics, but we need to be careful not to, I suppose, not to just paint them as being some kind of super beings, because they don't appreciate that either. So if we look, there's a list of some conditions, and there is many, many more of those conditions in existence, I suppose, and maybe some more that we will need in the future that have yet to be diagnosed. But in terms of what do we do? So I suppose I just want to ask you for a moment, and I think we're going to have another poll, excuse me, is do you or does your workforce have any initiatives relating to neurodiversity? Okay, we'll just give it another minute or two, or a few seconds more. Okay, that's great, and it's very interesting, and I suppose it kind of validates some of the things that we'll be talking about. So I'm just going to end the poll, and thank you everyone for participating. So I'm just going to share those results with you now. So you can see that 35% of you said that your workplaces had some initiative in relation to diversity, but 65% said that they had no initiatives in relation to the neurodiversity. So I think that is something that is a sobering thought, especially when we consider some of the initial statistics basically telling us that we have quite a significant number in terms of maybe perhaps up to 20% of the workforce that is neurodiverse. So Armstrong basically said that we need to admit that there is no standard brain. Okay, so in terms of hold on just 1 minute, I just need to get this back. Thank you very much. We need to admit that there is no standard brain. Okay, he did some amazing work talking about the power of neurodiversity, and he said the term neurodiverse indeed refers to the infinite range of differences. Okay, but I think the really big one that we need to look at, he points out that the definitions and the language that we use when we talk about neurodiversity is over medicalized and can basically have some very negative connotations to it. We look at ADHD, for instance, so it talks about, deficit and dysfunction. So they have very negative terms in terms of trying to describe autism, okay, or attention deficit, hyperactivity, dysfunction. So there are all very negative terms, or it's a very negative acronym in trying to describe something. So we need to change how we describe this. Now, I'm not suggesting that I know the answer to that, but it's enough to know that we're overly emphasizing on the negative. So neurodiversity, then, it refers to the wide range of differences in the human brain. It recognizes neurological difference, such as autism and ADHD, and that we recognize that there are some normal variations in the human genome, normal variations. Okay, so the benefits of neurodiversity in workplace, it brings numerous benefits: increased innovation and creativity through diverse perspectives and thoughts, enhanced problem solving because they think differently and may be able to think out of the box an awful lot easier than I might be able to. Improved attention to detail and pattern recognition. And that attention to detail can be, I see it in my own son, when he's interested, he can focus for incredibly long times. But if he's not really interested in the subject, then that focus gets an awful lot shorter, maybe 5 to 10 minutes most, without taking a break to come back to that topic again. Okay, so it's just in terms of how their ability to focus varies dependent on their level of interest. And they may be able to focus for much longer than we would, even over topics that we like. Okay, so greater focus and sustained concentration on tasks. So, but there are challenges, there's no doubt, in having them in the workplace. Issues such as maybe sensory sensitivities, overstimulation with light or noise can cause difficulties for them. There may be difficulties with social interactions in terms of how they interpret those interactions, or in fact in how they are interpreted themselves. They can be sometimes a little bit over direct, or what people call intense, and we find that can find that a bit off-putting. Some executive function and organizational difficulties may be there, and there may be misunderstandings and misconceptions about those. So in terms of what we can do to help with neurodiversity, we can provide clear communications and expectations. Remember that email is just a transformation of information from one site to another. It does not verify communication, which means that the reader understands what the sender meant and vice versa. So these things and texting, whilst they are ubiquitous now, it does not mean that that actual communication is happening. It means that information is being sent back and forth, which is not the same thing. Okay, so we need to offer flexible work arrangements and schedules, create quiet or sensory areas that they can work in from time to time when they need to focus, implement training programs and offer mentorship and support, which we referred to earlier. And then accommodations, flexible workplaces, assistive technologies where possible to aid communications, clear guidelines and instructions for tasks and projects, and additional time or breaks for processing information. So we need to be mindful of these things. So in terms of awareness, we need to promote awareness and education. And we saw that only that 65% of our workforces have no awareness in terms of how neurodiversity is drawn to the attention of the wider workforce. So workshops, presentations, guest speakers, perhaps people that have been very successful in life come in and talk to you about their experience of being neurodivergent and how they've got on, sharing success stories and emphasizing the value of that diverse perspectives. And then finally, highlighting success stories, showcase their contributions, provide role models, and break down those stereotypes and misconceptions, and certainly those negative connotations in relation to how neurodiverse is explained. Okay, so lastly, we need to embrace neurodiversity. They are in our workforce and they are going to be in our workforce. So in order for us to utilize them and to make them a fully, I suppose, participant in the workforce and in society, we can really unlock innovation and productivity and success if we embrace neurodiversity. Okay, thank you very much on that one. Okay, then we're going to lastly, or well, not lastly, we're nearly there. We're looking at AI implications for leaders. And as I said, this is a fast moving space. So I'm intentionally trying to shoot at something that's passing me at 100 miles an hour. So I've done my best to try and do that. So I suppose we want to have a look at, in terms of what have you experienced, or what do you experience in terms of AI in your workplace, or what are you utilizing, if any, AI to help you do your work? And if you could put that into the Q&A, that would be great.
Hi, Garrett. I can help you moderate this Q&A as well. So we've 6
That's
existing
great,
questions
Aisling. Thank
there.
you.
Oh, no problem at all. We've 6 questions there just from the previous one. So we'll just skip them for now and we'll jump onto them at the very end of the webinar. But I'm just going to read through. I can read them out to you. So ChatGPT is what Mary says. Someone says, I don't use AI at all. ChatGPT again from Elaine. Any of the questions on neurodiversity, we'll just get to it at the end of the webinar, if that's okay. Shane said communications, presentations. I assume he's using AI in those areas. A few people say they don't use AI at all, actually. ChatGPT seems to be a lot of it. So it kind of seems to be a mix between ChatGPT or not at all. Yeah, algorithms and open AI's column says, yeah, that kind of seems to be the trend at the moment.
Well, it may be of interest to those of you that have logged on. Every single image in this deck is AI generated. Okay, I didn't go out and look for onto the internet and try to find an image that said what I wanted it to say, or that looked kind of like what I wanted it to. I went onto the AI tools and I said, create me an image that describes this. The very first one image in the deck, what I described was, I said, I want an AI image of multi-generational, multiple genders, looking into a crystal ball and trying to interpret the future of business. And those are the lines that I put in. And that was the first image it gave back to me. It took about less than 60 seconds for AI to generate that image. So every single image that I have in this deck is there, and it saved me acres of time that I would have spent on the internet trying to find some images that spoke to what I wanted it to say. So I think that it's very interesting, and I've embraced it in this deck. I've also used, I suppose, in terms of Grammarly AI. Grammarly, some of you may be aware that you can use it to help you write better English, and now it has an AI function that you can actually ask it to improve your text, and you can tell it speak casually, speak or write with an empathic voice, write for expertise, for academia, and it changes its style. and helps you to communicate. And it's certainly when we see the diversity that we talked about in the workplace, maybe diversity in terms of English competency, that might be something that will help people to actualize their English a lot better and basically improve communications. So let's just have a look, and thank you everyone for pitching into that Q&A. Okay, so artificial intelligence, it's not just an emergent technology, catalyst for redefining leadership. We stand at the threshold of a new era, and this AI-powered leadership revolution that might promise to redefine the way we work and live, and it's likely to transform how we work. So again, all these images are AI generated. So leadership, it's about making informed moves in a world where data is abundant and more complex. And AI helps leaders decipher complex data landscapes, extracting valuable insights, and providing a roadmap. And this clarity that AI can give empowers leaders to make quick, accurate decisions during time-sensitive situations. And you know, us as people, when we're under pressure, our body chemistry conspires against us. The more pressure we're under, the more adrenaline that we generate, and the less our frontal cortex is engaged, because it's powering up our muscles to run away. It's fight and flight syndrome. So AI, of course, doesn't feel anxious. It doesn't feel worried or fearful, whilst we would if we're trying to make decisions really, really quickly, and we've a lot of data coming in that we need to process. So if we use AI to do that, and then we decide on the decision and how we're going to think about communicating that, that's something that we can do that add value. So AI enables leaders to explore strategic options and detect potential risks, and it offers a complete view of the business terrain. So it offers help with goal setting, ChatGPT that many of you mentioned, to create employee performance goals and action plans. BetterWorks uses AI and machine learning in its platform to help managers write higher quality business performance feedback. And I don't know, I certainly had in my management career, you know, I've had more than 30 people reporting to me, and I used to hold my head in my hands when the end of year reports would come up, and I think, oh my God, you know, I've got to write all of these things, and they've got to be personalized and relevant to the people. And it just presented a huge problem. Not so much that I didn't want to do it, but in terms of the time I had available to do it. So perhaps AI can lend us a hand there. And one of the benefits then of AI is the ability to create customized learning plans for employees. So this is done by analyzing performance reviews and so on. ChatGPT, again, can be used for this purpose. So there's many, many things. It's not just about writing. It's very, very capable, and we need to embrace this. Okay, I think the genie is out of the bottle and we can't put it back in, but you know, we need to think how we use it. Now, another thing that is less ubiquitous out there, but it's certainly happening and it's coming, is sentiment analysis. AI has the capability to understand text and speech patterns and identify the emotional state of individuals. So by customizing their communication styles, leaders can help and make more impactful relations by boosting productivity and enhancing teamwork, if we're able to understand more deeply how the person that's writing to us is feeling. So AI has benefits in that regard, but there are no doubt there are risks in relation to AI. Okay, anyone who's looked at the ChatGPT debates will realize that there are limitations and risks to be addressed by HR functions. I know that the European Union right now is trying to, I suppose, catch up and put some legislation around this in terms of its use. And experts say that policies in employee training to govern the use of AI in performance should cover a number of key areas, and organizations need to be aware of generative AI's challenges and risks. I mean, one of the examples would be where somebody was looking for, I know it was on the media, they were looking for an image of somebody working in a fast food restaurant, and more than 96% of the images they generated were of people of color. And of course, that's not what they really wanted. And it looked like it was suggesting that white people don't work in those environments, which of course they do. And that would be like racist to put something like that out there. So we need to be aware of its capabilities, but also of its limitations. But as I said, this is a very, very fast moving space. So let's see where that goes. Okay, so I think that Aisling was going to talk to you a little bit before we moved into our last section.
Thank you, Garrett, and apologies for interrupting the flow of the webinar. So I just want to take a few seconds just to talk to you about our Professional Academy diplomas. So we offer over 40 Professional Academy diplomas, 12 of which are in the topics of leadership and management. So that's spanning from leadership and management itself to HR management, change management, women in leadership, and so forth, just to name a small portion of them. If you would like to, I'm going to launch a poll there now. You should see it on your screen. Yes, this one here. So you should see that there. If you would like to learn a little bit more about our courses, please do just select yes there in the poll, and one of our education consultants will follow up with you via email in the coming days. So we'll just give that a few seconds, Garrett, and then I'll hand it back over to you. Thank you, guys.
Sure, we'll let that run.
And again, please feel free. We've loads of questions there in the Q&A, so please feel free to keep popping in your questions. I think we just have one more section of the webinar to go through, and then we're going to facilitate a Q&A. And again, if you have any questions about our courses themselves, pop them in there as well. We have Austin, an education consultant, on the call with us who'll be able to answer any of those questions there now as well. So I think that's good there. So we're going to end that poll there now, and I'll hand it back over to you, Garrett. Thank you very much for giving me that time.
Okay. Do you want me to share the results, Aisling, or?
No, it's okay. We can just close it down. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so the final section that we're going to have a little bit look at is transformative or transformative and servant leadership styles. Okay, and there's a reason why I've focused on those two, and many of you, I'm sure, are aware of many leadership styles. Okay, but the definition of transformational leadership is an approach in which the leader inspires, motivates team members to create positive changes, and the leadership style can increase group morale, lead to rapid innovation, decrease turnover, and foster a sense of ownership. And it's a process where leaders and followers raise each other to higher levels of motivation. And if you link that back to what we discussed when we were looking at generations, you can see why that might be a particular value. Also, servant leadership then puts followers' needs, growth, and well-being first. In other words, these types of leaders adopt a serve-first mindset and prioritize their organization, employees, and community above themselves. And it's a direct contrast in styles to the autocratic leadership, transactional leadership, and bureaucratic leadership, all of which focus on the structure of hierarchy and a rigid give and take relationship. So why now? Why are they more popular? These leadership styles have been around for years. Okay, so we've been aware of them. But you know, if we think about some of the things that have happened recently, banking leaders were significantly held responsible for the crisis in causing stakeholders to lose homes or face insurmountable debts from which many never recovered. Carlian came under fire regarding their finances and quickly went into liquidation, 900 million debt pile and 600 million pension deficit. Okay, KPMG themselves were fined 2.1 million by the Financial Reporting Council after admitting to misconduct in its high street fashion chain Ted Baker audits. And then Kraft, they engaged in an expense management scheme that resulted in the restatement of several years' worth of financial reporting. And the firm's former chief operating officer and chief procurement officer were both charged with misconduct. And there are many, many more examples. I could have filled slides with these examples, but the reaction of the population to these things is that we are very, very displeased and unhappy with any kind of unethical behavior. We're no longer willing to have all sacrificed in the name on the altar of profit. That's not good enough for us anymore. And it's led to this widespread desire for more responsible employee and client-focused leadership styles and ethics in leadership. So what is expected then of our future leaders? Some bold action will be required because we often work in organizations where maybe that model of leadership isn't given to us, okay? But nevertheless, we are the ones that are driving and are leading into the future. So we may have to stand up and be counted and willing to challenge. So what we're being asked for is to be more productive, more sustainable, to create a meritocracy, more equitable, profitable, and purposeful, but logical, human-centric, competitive, but also deeply collaborative. Okay, so our employees, our clients expect access to us, and they expect us to act in their best interests in an ethical and sustainable way. Okay, folks, I'm aware of the time, and I just wanted to give you a chance, if I could, to open the floor for a Q&A. And if anybody would like to post some questions, I'll do my best if I can within the time to answer.
That's great, Garrett. I can help you as well because we have a few questions there. So if you want, I can moderate them. I can read out some of the questions
Yes,
and anything that.
if you could.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So we have one here from Mina. So should we only address generation with its own way of work, or should we, beside doing that, encouraging different generations to try do it other way also, mix and match, because every way has its pros also.
I think you're right. I think the mix and match is the right way to go. What I was basically trying to show in the slides is what do these individuals value, or these individual cohorts value. So if we know what they value, then we're better able to do that mix and match, as you say, and to help the different generations understand where each generation may be coming from. So with that increased level of understanding, then we may get that collaborative and the real benefits of having generations in the workforce. So definitely not. We do not want any form of siloed custom treatment for one generation over another. We just need to have greater awareness of what it is that they need and what they value. I hope that helps.
Yeah, great. Another question here now. The biggest danger in terms of neurodiversity is too much talk of superpowers without addressing the challenges.
No, absolutely. I agree with that. And because I suppose because of my own personal circumstances, I know that this term superpowers is not something that people with neurodiversity appreciate. They don't like to be labeled with those things. I think if you were to ask most of them, there is this need, like all of us, to fit in and to feel like that we're not outside the normal parameters, if there is such a thing as normal these days, in relation to our peers. So they don't appreciate this superpowers. But on the other hand, it is good that we recognize some of the things that they are capable of that may be better than us, okay, or better than the norm, if we like, and try and make job designs that are more applicable and more useful and more engaging for those that are with neurodiverse. So I would 100% agree with you. You know, this term, oh, you have superpowers. They don't enjoy that, and would prefer that it wasn't said. But understanding that, we also need to understand what they might be particularly good at. I hope that answers.
Yeah, great. And just a great suggestion here from Monica, who said that in terms of neurodiversity, sending out meeting agendas and information in advance of the meetings, if you give this stuff to everyone in advance, people will have time to process and absorb it. Sorry. And on the back of that, then just another question from Max here. So in terms of neurodiversity again, have you any recommendations on how to adjust your recruitment process so that neurodiverse candidates can have equal opportunities? I think that's a good question.
Well, I think that's a great question in terms of neurodiversity, but I think that what we can do in terms of HR is, if you think about the interview process, okay, we can often find that quite stressful. And I think sending out questions in advance, again, it's something that goes back to what Monica just said. Basically informing them in as much as possible what's going to happen and when would certainly help that interview process. Be mindful of the time that a neurodiverse person may be able to concentrate for is also useful. That maybe we need to use more breaks, maybe have a 5-minute break before we move on to the next section in terms of interviewing, in order to allow them to present themselves in the best way possible. But we also need to be very clear and use less legalistic language in the messages that we often send out in recruitment forms, which are entirely unhelpful. And even for the likes of me, I often look at kind of these type of forms and wonder, do you really want that person to join? Because you've got so much information here. It just seems, it just seems a completely overboard. So I think we need to be mindful. I think we need to be creative. I think we need to be able to talk about neurodiversity in the same way as we talk about any other type of diversity. We talk about diversity in the workplace very easily now. It's one of the biggest things in management is understanding diversity, but we need to be as comfortable with that as talking neurodiversity. And it's only with increased communications and increased promotion of that within the workplace are we ever going to make it a level playing field for all of our unique ways of thinking.
Great. Just hear from Elizabeth. Now, I suspect this may be on the AI section of the webinar. We tried using LinkedIn for job advertisement, but it wasn't very accurate and did not narrow down candidates to our preferred requirements.
Yes, I would agree. But and the thing is that feeds into that example like that I gave, where they were looking for an image of people who worked in fast food. But those models are advancing at a rapid rate. I mean, even saying that something wasn't so great and I used it 2 weeks ago, that could be completely different now. The machine learning, those that have machine learning inbuilt are incredible. I was watching a program recently, and maybe it mightn't be so appropriate, but they had a fighter pilot in the US, and they put him up against let's say this algorithm, and the algorithm knew nothing about flight, it knew nothing about combat, and it knew nothing about the aircraft. And within half an hour, it had learned how to defeat him, a man of vast experience. So it's quite incredible, the high-end machine learning. But I only see that as coming down and being more ubiquitous in the programs that we're likely to have access to. And I think that LinkedIn, whilst I completely get and your experience of it, I think that those kind of experiences will be lessened over the years. but we must never allow AI. It's only there as an aid to us. It shouldn't be the defining decision maker. We need to make sure that we're allowing it to do what it does well, but we need to retain ownership of the actual decisions. Okay, so that we're actually utilizing AI rather than becoming a passenger of AI, if you like.
Great. Just a question here by an anonymous attendee. Can you share what tools you use to generate the images?
Um, do I have them? Yeah, I think I can, but it would have to be something afterwards. I wouldn't
Yeah,
be able to share
absolutely.
it
Yeah.
right now. But yeah, absolutely. I'm more than happy to share any of the websites that I used in creating the images.
Yeah,
I'll
absolutely. What
send
we
them
can
on
do is, yeah,
after.
we can send them in the email afterwards with the
Yeah,
recording and the slide
absolutely.
deck. Yeah.
Okay.
One here from Sabrina. So AI will be huge in assisting persons with disabilities. I am visually impaired and am extremely excited about the possibilities for future developments in the area of personal assistance.
Yes, and I'm very excited as well. I share that excitement with you because I look at so many examples around society where you know things are not done as well as they could do. I mean, imagine if, for instance, we were able to use satellite technology to map the paths and then be able to identify uh, areas where people could be at risk of falling over, or there's some kind of an obstacle in the way, maybe for wheelchair users and all sorts, and that we may be able to react using AI and using analytics to get our teams out there to address that. I mean, there's so many applications, so many things that we could do, and I'm really looking forward to some of the more positive aspects of AI rather than some of the more negative connotations that have gone out recently in relation to cheating and ChatGPT and the theft of images and so on. It has, and whilst those things are very valid concerns, I think we do also need to embrace the more positive things and see how can society actually benefit from the integration of AI with our normal and our working lives.
That's great. I think we might have one here for Austin. Actually, first of all, we have Patrick who said he's already on one of our courses, so that's great. You might let us know what course you're on, Patrick, and how you're finding it. Another question here that I think I might pose to Austin there. Which course do you recommend for preparing for AI in HR?
Yeah, it's a good question. I would probably say that the HR management course would now touch on it a little bit, but the AI for business is probably the best course to kind
Yeah.
of get a grips with all things AI. So, first kind of protocol would be AI for business, but I would imagine even the HR management one is having to touch on the subject somewhere along the way now. So, that would be my starting point as a student.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you want to go onto our website, you can go onto the AI for Business page and you can actually download the brochure there and you'll be able to know more about that specific course. I suppose I'm just conscious of the time, so we might just take one more question and I might move it along to just your last segment of the webinar there where you talked about transformational leadership. So just a question there, is transformational leadership complementary to servant leadership or contradictory?
I see it as a complementary style. It is certainly not contradictory. There's no reason why you can't be transformative and be very collegiate in terms of how you go about leading the people that you're tasked with leading. It was something that was said to me very early on in my career. They said, Garrett, are you sure you want to be a leader? Because you will very, very quickly go from a leader of one to the servant of many. People bring their hopes to you. People bring their family troubles to you. People need holidays, sick leave, all sorts of things that you need to manage because this is affecting their lives. Their work lives affects their home life, and their home life affects their work life. So if you're going to be successful in leading people, you need to consider this. Is this something that you want to? And rather than just viewing leadership as in, I will chart the way and I will make the decisions and power my way to ever more increasing salaries, I suppose. for want of another word. But no, I think that transformation leadership and servant leadership can be entirely complementary. And I see that the integration of both those styles could lead to that, I suppose, that superior employee engagement and experience for the leader and for the employee and for its organization.
Great. Thank you so much, Garrett. I think that's a great note to end it on. Thank you so much for bringing your experience and expertise to this webinar. I think we've all learned a lot from it. Again,
I'm
if you haven't
delighted to be
already,
asked.
oh no, thank you very much. If you haven't already, you can go onto our website. You can browse our brochures. You might be able to find a course that's applicable to you. If you did select yes in that poll, we will contact you via email very shortly. And again, you can expect this recording link and the slide deck in your emails in the coming days. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us, and thank you, Garrett.
Thank you. It was a pleasure
Bye
to
bye.
share this hour with you.
Great, absolutely. Bye bye, Garrett. Bye
Bye
everyone.
now.